We're almost halfway through the 2022 baseball season, and for the San Francisco Giants, it has been a grind. And so coming up today, we're going to address this overall topic from a number of different angles. We're going to look at what specifically has led to the Giants having a more difficult time this season than last year, and also why one of the commonly cited solutions to this problem actually may not have been a solution after all. And then we're going to get to a mailbag question as well. So all of that next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Giants listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code LOCKEDON at checkout. And coming up on today's show, as I said, I kind of want to use this off day to take a step back. I always find myself just kind of every day digging into the numbers in baseball and for the Giants specifically, of course. And what I ended up doing was I wanted to compare 2021 to 2022 in a number of ways, because obviously 2021 was such a great season, and people at this point of the year, I think we can see, like, it's always interesting to me. We have all these reactions to the early games in the season, and we're always saying, look, wait until about 45 games or so before you can take your first hard look at the team. And this is exactly why, because in the first week, 2 weeks of the season, we're not sitting there saying that the defense is the number one problem for the Giants. We weren't saying that at all. It took about this long. I mean, it was a few weeks ago that we started to talk about this, the defense and the pitching, basically like the unluckiness of some of the pitching, but then we can attribute a lot of it to defense, and that's another theme that has emerged in a big way. So at this point, I think it's appropriate to look at 2022 versus 2021 and look for differences. And so, first of all, we said this was going to be a mailbag. We will get to a mailbag question later, and there's also another off day this week, and we'll do a full mailbag after that off day. But just to kind of summarize, I wanted to look at position players first, because the pitching, we'll get to that in a minute. But in terms of the hitting, I think that the hitters take a lot of heat from fans. There's just kind of this, like, the struggling offense. I get questions about the struggling offense all the time, and I understand it. At times during games, it does seem like they're very much struggling, and they've been far more hot and cold rather than consistent than last year. And one of the biggest differences between last year's position player group and this year's that I was able to see when I was looking through last year through 72 games versus this year through 72 games, one of the biggest differences is actually in the isolated power, which is slugging percentage minus batting average. And just to give the 15-second summary on why isolated power is better for measuring actual power than slugging percentage, is if you're 4 for 10 with 4 singles, that's a 400 average and a 400 slugging. You have a 400 slugging even though all you had was singles. Whereas if you're 1 for 10 with a homer, your average is 100, but your slugging is 400. And so it's the same slugging percentage with a very different outcome, right? Like 4 singles versus 1 homer. So the isolated power for the player with the 4 singles is 0, slugging minus average, because they're the same. Isolated power is 0, versus for the guy who's 1 for 10 with a home run, his isolated power is 300, 400 slugging minus 100 batting average. So it's a better indicator of the power. It's like taking singles out of the equation, because a guy who hits for high average, his slugging is going to be inflated a little bit by singles. So anyway, For the Giants, their isolated power in 2021 was 202 through 72 games. And this year through 72 games, it's 165. That is an 18% decrease in isolated power. And importantly to note, I wanted to look at what was the league average last year versus what is the league average this year. And the league average isolated power is down 8%. So the Giants are down 18% and the league average is down 8%. So a significantly worse than average, more significant than average drop in isolated power for the Giants from last year to this year. But if we look at something like on base percentage, the Giants are only down 4.2% from last year to this year, from 336 to 322, and the league average on base percentage is down 2%. But the Giants at 322 this year are still better than the league average of 312. And the league average batting average was 242 last year and 242 this year. And for the Giants, it went from 250 last year to 240 this year. So they've basically, forget all that. The only number that really matters to me is what is weighted runs created plus, because it's combining everything and putting it into one number. And that one number, league average is 100. And last year, the Giants through 72 games were at 113. So 13% above average offense overall, weighting the different outcomes properly. And yeah, 13% above average. And this year they're 7% above average. So that's only a 5% decrease, which is not too bad when all is said and done. But so like when I look at that, the reaction is that, okay, that's not too bad of a drop. And when we look at base running, FanGraphs has this base running metric called base running runs above average. And through 72 games last year and really all season, base running was, I continued to say last year, their biggest issue. And through 72 games, they were at minus 4.7 base running runs above average. And through 72 this year, they're at 3.2, positive 3.2. So a positive swing there, almost 8 runs in the positive direction from a base running standpoint. So only 5% worse offense, better base running, and yet the overall wins above replacement for their position players went from 13.5 through 72 games to 9 through 72 games, which is a 33% decrease. And so I'll leave it to you to figure out what is driving this. If your offense is only slightly down, your base running is better, and we're not talking about pitchers, we're just talking about position players, and your overall wins above replacement is down 33%. Well, you guessed it. It's the defense. FanGraphs also has this defensive runs above average metric, and last year the Giants through 72 games were at 11.4 defensive runs above average. 11.4. This year, minus 35.5. That is a 47 run swing in the negative direction from last year to this year. And so for me, when I look at that, it basically explains everything. If you add 47 runs to, or if you take away 47 runs from the runs the Giants have allowed this year, they go from a plus 40 run differential to a plus 87 run differential. So it improves their run differential more than 2 times over. And right now their run differential of plus 40 has an expected record of 40 and 32. Their actual record is just 1 win away from that, 39 and 33. Run differential is pretty good at kind of pegging your record. And if you add those 47 runs to the run differential by subtracting 47 runs off your runs allowed, they go to, like I said, plus 87. And that has an expected record of 46 and 26. So we're talking about 7 wins attributable to the difference in the defense from last year to this year, according to this FanGraphs defensive runs above average metric. So 46 and 26, that just tells me, that's amazing. That's an amazing 7-win difference through 72 games. It's pretty incredible. 10% basically of their wins they could have had if they had played defense like they played last year. And so the pitching would be better. Obviously, this is a run prevention issue. And if you look at the run score, that's the thing. It's like, I think we focus in the wrong area. If the run prevention was so much better, there would be less of a focus on the offense, because what not preventing runs does for you is it puts pressure on the offense, and you give up some runs early in the game, which has been a big recurring theme for the Giants, early deficits, I would say, and it puts pressure on the offense. And suddenly, as a fan, you're watching saying the offense must do something to come back from this deficit, when in reality, what really put you in that situation was poor run prevention. So anyway, coming up next, we're going to continue this discussion and talk about, there's something that's being talked about a lot lately, and it has to do with the Giants' spending habits. So we're going to talk about my thoughts on that. If the Giants needed to do more, and if signing these top free agents from last offseason really would have been the solution. And in some cases, maybe, and in some cases, maybe not. But first, whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Giants listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON, plus every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. So shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? What if you don't know? Embarrassing. And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Ask them what the part is. They'll give you the piece of paper telling you what the part is, or just ask them. Look it up yourself on Rock Auto. See how much cheaper it is. Make that decision. It's a no-brainer. And then they'll happily install it for you, and you've just saved a bunch of money. It is an absolute no-brainer. I really have done it myself numerous times. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, as promised, I want to talk about, so lately there's been a lot of talk about the Giants spending. There was this Andy Baggerly piece. Dieter Kurtenbach, my good buddy, also wrote a piece about the Giants spending in the offseason. And for the most part, I agree with what Baggerly and Kurtenbach are saying. And of course, a lot of fans have been expressing this in general on the internet and to me personally in mailbag questions and whatnot, just about the Giants, and not just now, but in the offseason. And again, I said this yesterday, but I gave the Giants a C- for their offseason, even though I liked a lot of the signings that they made. And I was a big fan of Carlos Rodon and thought that he could be as good as he has been. And that's been a great signing. Jacob Junis was a low-key, really good signing. Jock Peterson, even though it was 1 year, $6 million, cheap, short-term, he's been great. And he has been better than a lot of the top free agent signings. There's just no getting around that. And so that's why, especially when we combine that with the fact that we're going to look, I've said this a bunch of times, but we're going to do it again, the top 5 position players in terms of biggest contracts and the top 5 starting pitchers and their by biggest contract and how these groups have performed. And that's the thing, because what I see, not really in Kurtenbach's article, but I've seen it, that we're naming names. We're naming specific players and saying, why didn't they just sign this guy? And if they had signed this guy. But it's like intellectually dishonest. And I don't think anyone's doing this on purpose. It's just like a bias we have. We ignore the guys who are not doing well. And like to say they should have signed Kevin Gausman. Look, I get it. There's the connection. He was obviously on the Giants. He wanted to come back to the Giants. But if you look at the top 5 biggest signees for starting pitchers, and just acknowledge, like, Kevin Gausman had just as much risk as anybody. That's the thing. It's like we have to acknowledge that it's kind of a gamble, and you could have wound up with the performance that you're getting from any of these guys. And let's say Gausman, okay, signs with the Blue Jays. A lot of people were very disappointed when the Giants didn't sign, say, Marcus Stroman, okay? And a lot of you listening probably wanted the Giants to sign Marcus Stroman. Just be real, okay? So he signed with the Cubs for 3 years and $71 million, a hefty contract on a short-term deal. But I think a lot of people thought that's exactly the type of contract the Giants would want to make, and were surprised they didn't make that type of move. I personally didn't really like the fit. I liked more kind of swing and miss than you're going to get from Stroman when you're talking about that kind of money. He's more of a contact guy. I compared him to Dallas Keuchel, who was really good for a while, but then just when the decline starts, it can be pretty stark. And that's what happened to Keuchel. And this year, for Marcus Stroman, he's got a 5.32 ERA in 47 and a third innings. And he's currently on the IL with right shoulder inflammation. I think it's inflammation. It's a right shoulder injury, and he's on the IL. So just acknowledge that, okay, you wanted the Giants to spend more. What if they had signed Marcus Stroman? And what if they had signed Chris Bryant, who has also been injured pretty much all season? He finally came off the injured list yesterday, and these are numbers through 2 days ago. So yesterday's game is not updated in these numbers, but I think he had one single in the game. So it doesn't really move the needle. But Bryant had played I think now he's played in 18 games on the season. He's got an 80 weighted runs created plus, meaning 20% below average offense, minus 0.3 FanGraphs wins above replacement, just 73 plate appearances, and it's a 7-year, $182 million contract. So I think a lot of people, like when we're saying they should have spent this money, okay, just spending the money does not promise you results. And I get it. There is an association. It's like you have a better shot maybe of having better results versus not spending the money. And I understand that. And the other thing that bothers me is the Giants aren't acting like the Oakland A's. They're acting more like a slightly above mid-tier spending team. But the A's are like rock bottom. And actually, this was mentioned, and I was going to say this myself, but in Kurtenbach's article, that he said that the Giants are closer to the A's than they are to the Dodgers. Not by the numbers that I'm looking at. FanGraphs uses pre-arbitration estimates. I don't think that this other website that gets commonly used uses pre-arbitration estimates. It's kind of irrelevant because we're talking about a difference of $10 million moving the needle to, are you closer to the Dodgers, or are you closer to the top, or are you closer to the bottom? And the Giants are closer to the top. But still, the point is taken. They're not at the top. They're in the middle. They're a little bit above the middle. They spend more than the average team by the median and by the mean. But so the point is, like, the solution to the Giants' problems this year, and let's be real, their problems, even though they have them, certainly, and the defense is a huge one, they're still 39 and 33, and right there, like, what, a half a game out of a playoff spot as of yesterday. I didn't update it today, but they're right there, and 39 and 33, and to me, capable at any time of perhaps going on a run and improving. If they can just kind of regress positively defensively, like I said, there's a lot of room for improvement there, and everything else is okay, but the defense. But anyway, if you just say, like, the solution was they should have spent more, well, not really so, because there's a lot of players out there. Bryant, Marcus Semien, who I really wanted, 7-year, $175 million. I thought that was much more than he would ultimately get. I thought it was more like a $125 million over maybe 6 years versus 175. And he has an 83 weighted runs created plus, 0.7 FanGraphs wins above replacement. Javier Baez, never a guy that I personally thought the Giants would target, but it's been a disastrous signing as well. 6 years, $140 million, 78 weighted runs created plus, 0.4 FanGraphs wins above replacement. And we can go through the list. Max Scherzer was the top pitcher who signed in terms of biggest overall guarantee at $130 million over 3 years. Good for him. But he's been hurt his oblique. He's only pitched in 49 and 2/3 innings, but he's been good. And I like the rest of that contract. I mean, I like Max Scherzer moving forward when he's healthy. But how about this? Robbie Ray, who essentially the market valued the same way as Kevin Gausman. Robbie Ray got 5 years, $115 million. Kevin Gausman got 5 years, $110 million. So Robbie Ray actually slightly above Kevin Gausman. Robbie Ray was coming off a Cy Young Award win in the American League. And Robbie Ray has a 4.07 ERA in 90 and 2/3 innings, 0.9 FanGraphs wins above replacement, which uses fielding independent pitching. So the fielding independent pitching kind of matches up with the ERA, which is more or less league average for Robbie Ray. Kevin Gausman has been very good. So, yeah, I mean, in hindsight, it's really easy to pick which players you should have signed in hindsight. And I think it's intellectually dishonest to be like, well, I knew it was Gausman and nobody else that they should have signed. Not Robbie Ray, not Eduardo Rodriguez, not Marcus Stroman, not Chris Bryant, not Marcus Semien, not Javier Baez. I knew they would all struggle. And Kevin Gausman and, I don't know, I mean, Trevor Story was mentioned the other day simply because he's a good defender, but he's struggled offensively. He's been average offensively. And so just having spent the money, I get it. And I wanted them to do more. But I'm just saying it doesn't promise you that things would be any better. And actually, it's its own set of problems. You would have articles being written about how they made a bad choice, perhaps, on signing these players. Like, seriously, if you had signed Stroman and Bryant, you would be feeling a world of hurt right now. And really, for the Rangers, I mean, they made these huge acquisitions in Seager and Semien, and they've combined for... I mean, Seager defensively and as a base runner has been pretty good, but he's been average offensively. And so it's just not true that spending would have necessarily solved any of their problems. It might have if you had hit on the right guys. If you had signed Gausman and if you had signed, I don't know, Freddie Freeman instead of Belt, then yeah, you would be in a much better position. But if you had signed Robbie Ray, Marcus Stroman, and a bunch of these other guys, you would possibly be in a worse position. So it's just, we just need to be honest about that. We can still say we want them to take that risk, but it's just, you have to acknowledge it. You might have ended up in a worse situation as a team. So coming up next, we're going to get to the one mailbag question, which is about what the Giants might do at the trade deadline. Is it possible that this will not be a deadline during which they are buyers? So we'll get to that question in just a second. But first, betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs, which are over, and Major League Baseball, which is what we're going to talk about, because they've got updated Major League Baseball playoff odds. And I haven't taken a look yet, to be honest, but I know that they've been updated, and I would encourage you to check it out, because I think when the Giants are playing poorly, it's a good opportunity. They usually get underrated, to check out those odds and see if maybe they're being a little bit underrated moving forward, because I still like the Giants moving forward. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And betonline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, we're going to get to this one mailbag question. Shout out to, I'm going to pull up the name here, Amir on Twitter, for saying, if you're doing a mailbag, here's my question. Thanks for taking the initiative. I like the question, so we're going to get to it today. Do you see this as a 2019 type of deadline? Given the downward trajectory of the team, do you see trading Belt or Flores as a possibility to hedge against our future? I don't see us as buyers. So I think this is an interesting question, and I'm going to say that I agree. I do think part of what you asked will be true, but also I don't necessarily know about another part. Okay, so when you mentioned 2019, I think that is a distinct possibility. And what they did in 2019 was that they sold and they bought. So they kind of towed the line. And I thought it was a brilliant deadline. Turned out that a lot of the players they acquired, like Mauricio Dubon, didn't end up amounting to all that much with the Giants. And then, of course, they traded him for Papierski, and we were somewhat excited about him, and then they DFA'd Michael Papierski. So that's its own subject. We haven't even really talked about that. But they had Dubon, and then now he's gone, and they didn't really get anything for him. But that speaks more to that was just he wasn't an impact player than anything else. And so, but at the time, I mean, it was a worthwhile shot that they took, and they traded Drew Pomeranz, who was very bad with the Giants out of the rotation, and then he became a good bullpen arm, but he's currently hurt. So hasn't really worked out for him either. And they also traded Sam Dyson for Jalen Davis, and that didn't work out. Jalen Davis and some others, Kai-Wei Tang and others. And then they traded Mark Melancon. They got out from underneath that contract, which I thought probably the best move of all was shedding Melancon, because that just wasn't working out here. And then they also made some buying moves. They bought, what was his name? Scooter Gennett, right? The second baseman. And then they later DFA'd Joe Panik, who is currently unsigned, out of baseball right now. But I thought that was a worthwhile gamble. A lot of these moves, like in hindsight, didn't end up making a real impact. And I did think that they probably should have dealt Will Smith, or at least that they could have gotten more for Will Smith than they got for Madison Bumgarner, because both of those guys were on the block, theoretically, but they didn't trade either of them, which I like. Like, don't just make a trade for the sake of making a trade. If the deal's not there, don't just do it. You got to hold out for a good deal, and they didn't get what was satisfactory, given that they were kind of still in the race. But regardless, they made moves to buy and they made moves to sell, and I think that is a possibility this year. I would still lean towards buyers as opposed to sellers. Look, they're 39 and 33. They've got the plus 40 run differential. They've got the room for improvement defensively and as a pitching staff, which I think is attributable to the defense. So we're not there yet. We've still got a month of baseball before they really need to really decide on these things. And the schedule is somewhat soft for the next few weeks here, at least week plus. And so it's kind of now or never in a way. And if they're middling around 500, or if they play 500 baseball for the next 30 days and they're still just 6 games over 500, then I think it's more likely. And of course, if they fall back more, then selling becomes more likely. But if they go on a run, then I think they'll probably be buyers. But do I see them trading Belt or Flores? I mean, it is possible. Both of those guys are in the last year of their deals. And so anyone who's on the last year of the deal could make sense. And particularly a move for me, I think what would ultimately make the most sense, as opposed to just a pure rental situation like Chris Bryant last year, like Wilson Contreras would be this year. Ultimately, what might make the most sense is trying to make a move for a player who kind of fills a position of need down the road. Like someone who's under club control for a couple more years at a position of need. Like you mentioned Belt, they don't have a first baseman of the future. Third base, Evan Longoria is in the last year of his deal. I think add him to that list. I think Longoria more likely than Flores. So you'd probably have to eat some money, but could be a similar situation to Mark Melancon, and it would open up a spot and you could try out David Villar and Jason Vossler and just kind of see what you have the rest of the way. And I'm not sure that would necessarily be a big step back from what they're getting out of Longoria. So that type of deal where they trade someone away that opens up a position for one of their prospects who's performing well and worthy of a shot, or bringing in somebody who is a young player or just kind of someone who's got multiple years of club control at a position of need moving forward, I think is a possibility. So we still have time before this becomes a question that we can fully answer, but I think that you're on the right track, and it's a good thought. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, smash that thumbs up button, 5-star button. Would really appreciate it. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Giants versus Tigers, Carlos Rodon on the mound. Tough good young lefty Tarek Skubal on the mound for the Tigers. So it's not going to necessarily be easy for the offense, but hopefully Rodon can just overmatch the Detroit Tigers, a team that's very familiar with him from his time in the AL Central with the White Sox. So we'll be back tomorrow breaking this one down. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay locked on Giants.